and welcome back to Bitesize Boxing. So we will be covering a few of the fights that are happening this weekend, probably tomorrow, unfortunately. I did want to cover the Ajit Kabayel fight, I just didn't get around to it. And the Dalton Smith fight, I have to say, I had no idea it was this weekend, the one with Subriel Matias. The promotion for that fight, for a world title fight, for two guys who are pretty well known, it's got to be the worst I've seen in years. So that needs a talk about, to be spoken about separately in and of itself as a video. But today we're going to be talking about Tyson Fury and his comeback and what I make of it. Of course, we all knew that Tyson Fury wasn't retired and that he was going to come back, obviously aiming for that Joshua fight. But with the whole sort of drama, I suppose you'd say, with Joshua and everything that's gone on with the car crash, it's not abundantly clear whether he's coming back. And if he does come back, I think Joshua is probably going to be compromised to some extent, whether that be psychologically or physically. So I really want to sort of focus on who he might fight in a comeback, as well as, you know, if he doesn't go the Joshua route, who is out there for him. Now, there are two very obvious names that spring straight to mind. That is that we're hearing apparently Arslanbek Makhmudov will be the comeback opponent for Tyson Fury should he fight earlier this year. And to me, that's not a bad comeback fight, and I think stylistically it favours Fury. It's one of those fights that I look at Arslanbek Makhmudov, he's a very straight up and down heavyweight, he's very strong, he punches bloody hard, don't get it twisted, you know, he's got attributes there that could trouble Fury, but very slow, very ponderous, not good foot speed, not particularly good hand speed either. He can time his shots quite well, Makhmudov, but again, he's not a fleet of foot heavyweight, and he's not an agile heavyweight. That being said, and something that I've been very steadfast on, and have been very unpopular in this opinion, I don't think Fury is either. Not at this stage, anyway. I was one of the few people who, from going back 2 or 3 years ago, 4 years ago even, I was saying that if Alexander Usyk fought for Tyson Fury, he would beat Fury. Now, I understand now, in the cold light of day, you know, once everything's happened, that's not an out there take. We saw him beat him twice, right? But I'm talking well before that. I was very much in the camp that Usyk would beat Fury, based off of the fact that, for me, Fury had very clearly lost a step in terms of foot speed. And he'd just generally, I mean, you look at his body, it looks completely different to it did, especially pre-comeback. But even over the last 2 or 3 years, physically, Fury has been deteriorating in front of our eyes. And I think that's been, I don't understand, not to sound disrespectful to people, why people haven't been able to see that. Like, I'll give you a good example. Tyson Fury changed his style in those Wilder fights, right? That second Wilder fight, that version of Fury, that Kronk style. The reason he did that was because he couldn't do the back foot style anymore, right? The back foot style that worked so well against Klitschko, he was barely able to scrape through using that against Otto Wallin, because the foot speed, the agility, that ballooning up in weight and coming back down, the body just could not do what it used to be able to do. So he had two options. He either persisted with that back foot, kind of hit it and hop it style, that at a certain level he was going to get beat using because you just didn't have the agility to pull it off anymore, or he had to adapt his style, which is what he did. And look, it showed strings to his bow, and it was very impressive. You know, the only time we've really seen him hit it and hop it and utilise that back foot style again was against Dillian Whyte. Now, that was against a Dillian Whyte who, by the point that he fought Fury, was already shot-worn and was ploddy to begin with. So that style was always going to be kryptonite for Whyte. But I look at Fury stylistically, and for me, again, from a body mechanics point of view, and from particularly, as I say, from an agility and reactions point of view, go and watch that Vladimir Klitschko fight, right? If you haven't watched it for a few years, I implore you to stop what you're doing and go and watch it again, because the difference in Fury's mobility in that fight from, say, even 5 years ago compared to that fight, it is night and day. It looks like a different human being in there. Not just physically in terms of the build, but in terms of just how he glides around the ring. The only, you know, that Fury is long gone, and even Fury post comeback said that Fury is dead. He can't do that anymore. He's been quite open about that, and so I think that Fury in those Usyk fights, for example, particularly in that first fight, it was the best we'd seen him for years. I want to say around was it the 4th or 5th round, where he really started to come into it and started working over Usyk. That's the best Fury we've seen for many, many, many years. But he's not able to sustain it anymore. You know, the stamina isn't there. Again, just the way he moves around the ring, it's completely different. He's a lot more ploddy. So I say all that to say this, and that against an Arslanbek Makhmudov, I think he's still probably got enough to get through him. But if he starts going in there against the who's who of the heavyweight division and he starts fighting everybody and he doesn't just jump straight into a Joshua fight, I expect him to get beat. And I expect him to possibly get beat by people who we might not expect him to get beaten by, because I think that even those Usyk fights, Usyk is degraded as well, right? The best Usyk isn't the Usyk that fought Anthony Joshua or who fought Daniel Dubois or indeed Tyson Fury for me. The best Alexander Usyk was down at cruiserweight fighting Gassiev. That was the best Alexander Usyk. And it's been a slow kind of downhill regression since then. So, again, and I expect that because he's a guy who, again, relies on his reflexes and his agility, and he's now nearly 40. So, of course, those attributes are not going to get better as you age. And with Tyson Fury, he also relied on those attributes, but again, he's really abused his body. So, I think personally, Fury has been masked in terms of the regression by the people he's fought and when he's fought them. And so, and of course the style he's utilised. As I say, I think if it was up to Tyson Fury, I don't think he ever would have gone the Kronk route. I really don't. I think Fury would have continued with that Peter Fury kind of style that he learnt, which was very slick on the back foot. That's what his bread and butter is, and that's what he would have continued to do. But he changed his style because he had to, not because he wanted to. And I think this is what not enough people kind of realise. So with all that being said, I think Fury in a comeback, I think there are people who can turn him over, and I think people would be quite surprised if he goes in there against a fresh fighter. Say Ajit Caballo gets through his fight at the weekend and, Caballo's still looking fresh, or even someone like a Fabio Wardley who has been muted. If the fighter he's in there against is fresh enough, they may be able to expose those holes in Fury that I believe that are there. And so I think Fury is somebody who has regressed a lot more than people think. And I think, again, even fighting people like Deontay Wilder, as people said, it's a one-trick pony. He's a one-trick pony, but it's a hell of a trick. He didn't need to show those strings to his bow. Really, who's he been in there against? He's been there against a shot-worn White, Chisora for the millionth time. These aren't fighters who are really going to show where you're at. And, of course, an Usyk, who is a great fighter, but an Usyk who I think has regressed as well. So I think if you were to put him in there against a hungry, fresh fighter, I don't expect him to ever fight Moses Itauma, for example, but I think if you put him in there against someone who has that freshness to them, I think you would see the issues in Fury being exposed that I'm talking about. For example, Fury doesn't fight for 3 minutes of every round anymore. He used to. One thing about Fury is, despite, the tie around the middle, he used to be able to fight at a brilliant clip. Even in that Vladimir Klitschko fight, he's moving all around the place, he's feinting, he's moving, and those feints have got a lot less common now. He barely feints at all compared to what he used to, and when he does, it's kind of just a few jitters and then he has to take a break. He's having to take far more breathers. When he does move around the ring, it's so much more ploddy and slow and methodical than it used to be. So as I say, I don't think this will end well if Tyson Fury does have a comeback and does it properly. But I don't expect him to. I say all that to say I don't expect him to. I think Fury will come back. He will probably fight Akhmadov, and then he will aim for one big cash-out fight against maybe Anthony Joshua, particularly if he thinks Joshua's compromised, and then he'll sail off into the sunset. Because I don't expect him to go in there against the who's who. I don't expect him to see, the next generation coming up and think, oh, you know what, I'm going to fight Caballero, then I'm going to fight Itauma, and then I'm going to fight whoever's doing well at that point. Fury's not that kind of guy. He's not going to do that. And if he did do that, he would lose one of those fights. I have no doubt about it at all in my mind. But you let me know what you think. A lot of people may disagree with this take, but I'd be interested to know what your views are. As I say, I think, for my eye, the Fury that we once had has been long gone. Fury, for me, peak Fury was that Klitschko fight, and he's never been back to that level since. He's had very good performances, and he's managed to adapt his style and still be able to get to a good level. But I genuinely think, and look, I'm no massive Fury fan, but the Fury we saw in that Klitschko fight was a special fighter. I truly believe that. The fighter that we've had since that fight, that's post-comeback, has been a very good fighter. That's the difference. He's been good enough to beat most of the top guys that have been around in his era as such. I'm talking about I say that. Has it? He's sort of fought Wilder and that's been it. And this is what I mean. He's kind of built this veneer for himself. He's beat certain top guys at certain times. But I think the version of Fury that fought Klitschko, I think you're talking about a guy there that you could put in there against all of the top guys in and around this time. And I think he probably beats, if not all of them, most of them. and I think he does it quite comfortably. I think that is a special fighter. I truly do. That performance in that Klitschko fight was unlike anything I've ever seen from a heavyweight before or since. The movement, the agility, it was unbelievable. The only thing that was lacking in that fight was his punch ability, really, in that he didn't turn his knuckles over very well. He was very slappy. But again, he's worked on that since then. So I often think that if that had never happened, he hadn't had that, you know, the ban and then going off into the sunset and disappearing and putting all that weight on. If you had had a different Fury who had stayed disciplined and maybe worked on his punch, you know, his ability to actually turn his knuckles over properly and really throw punches properly, I think it would be a very different story. We're talking about Tyson Fury, and where we rank him in the all-time rankings, I think would be very different as a result. But you let me know what you think. I'd be very interested to know. And yeah, take it easy, guys. Cheers.